Hey guys! Today I'm going to be making a cake inspired by a Nutella chocolate cake I found on Pinterest. If you know anything about this channel and have read the blog post I always mention in the videos, you may be thinking, but isn't Nutella branded? And yes, it most definitely is, but I'm going to talk about it in the tutorial. You want to begin with a very dark brown. I mixed in a tiny bit of black. Then roll out a sheet in the thickness you want the cake layers and cut out 4 circles. Do the same with a lighter brown but with a thinner sheet of clay and cut out 3 circles. You then want to put together the cake, and don't worry, you might as well be honest here, at this point it looks pretty crappy. If you want, you can go over it with a toothbrush, although this isn't really necessary, unless you're not going to do the next step, in which case you could add texture just with the toothbrush. You then want to take a fine needle tool and add some texture to the cake layers all the way around the edges. So I actually had to think twice before I decided on making this cake. I've had this picture in my inspiration folder for quite a while and I've really been wanting to make it, but obviously Nutella is a brand and I don't want to make branded things on this channel. The thing is that you don't see the brand on the cake, you don't see any wrapper or the jar of Nutella, you just see it as an ingredient which doesn't even have a logo. But couldn't I then just have called it a chocolate cake instead? And yes, I could, but the thing is that if anyone else has seen the picture of this cake and has seen the recipe, they're probably going to recognize it, and instead of having to answer questions about whether or not this is inspired by that specific cake, it's much easier to just put it in the title. For the layer of cream or frosting, I broke the tip off a toothpick and then used that. This is going to give a very rustic texture, and due to this being a very asymmetrical broken toothpick, it is also going to look very organic. Use your blade to cut a slice and then add texture the same way on the inside. The only difference really is that on the inside of the cake I am keeping the texture a bit more rough and more crumbly looking, whereas on the outside it is a bit more smooth. And on the inside you also want to make sure to add a few crumbs in between the layers of frosting, just to make it look more natural. If you're putting the cake slice on the side like I did, you also want to make sure to texture the bottom, because otherwise it's going to look quite strange. At this point I chose to pre-bake the cake just so I wouldn't end up squishing it, but you don't necessarily have to, it's completely up to you. I then mixed up kind of like a Nutella brown and took some of the same light brown from the frosting layers and then mixed these with Fimo Deco Gel to create some frosting. I find that when mixing small amounts of frosting like this, it's much easier to just use your X-Acto knife because it's going to kind of force the liquid clay into the clay a lot faster. Plus the flat side is going to give it a lot more surface area to work with than using the end of a paintbrush or a dotting tool. Apply this to your cake, making sure to make a few drips down the sides. Also, with this being kind of Pinterest inspired, if you have any recipes that you find on Pinterest that look quite delicious, it could be desserts or even dinner or lunch recipes, feel free to link those specific links in the comments if it's something you'd like to see a tutorial on. Pinterest is a site I use quite a lot for both cooking inspiration but also to find reference pictures for miniatures, and I have actually already gotten a couple of requests for items inspired by things on there. This is a very strange project for me to make because if you notice, there is no shading in this video, so I'm not going to be using any soft pastels or acrylic paint. Not something I'm used to. If you were to make this cake with a lighter brown for the base or cake layers, you would have to add some shading to the edges though. Next up, we're going to be making the piped dollops on top. I do have a video on my main channel showing how to make a miniature piping bag that you can use to then make frosting and whipped cream. I'm going to link that in the info box, but for this video I chose to sculpt it. I first rolled out a small snake and then curled this up to get kind of like that spiral shape. I then first used a needle tool to mark off where I wanted all the lines, and I then went over it with a needle tool and a pointy dotting tool to define the lines. Having the spiral shape to begin with is going to make it easier to see in which direction the line should be going and where they should end and start, as opposed to having a dome shape. And because I wanted these to look very uniform, I did bake it and then make a mold. If you have any questions about the tools and materials I use, I do have a video about it, which I always link in the info box. The same if you have any questions about baking and pre-baking. The info box is in general a very good place to get knowledge, so definitely check it out. And of course, if you enjoyed these videos and want to support the channel, please do subscribe and click the thumbs up. And if you have any food requests, feel free to leave them in the comments. The last thing I made were some sprinkles for the top, and for this I just took a dark brown again, rolled out some really thin snakes, pre-baked these and cut them into tiny pieces. Sprinkle these on top and then bake again. And if you pre-bake the dollops in the molds like I did, you also want to apply some liquid clay to help the sprinkles stick. Finally, you want to seal everything with glaze. I first applied a matte glaze to where the sprinkles are to kind of protect them from falling off. I then went in with a small amount of glass glaze, mostly just to give the frosting a slight shine, but also make the cake base look moist. I have no idea why people hate that word so much. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.